Hi friends, we are going to study a basic concept about polity, the three pillars of democracy. We all know what democracy means. Democracy is a political system in which the power or authority rests with the people. In short, a country that is run by the will of the people is called democracy. In a democracy, there are three main pillars: legislature, executive, and judiciary. Sometimes media is referred to as the fourth pillar, but generally there are three main pillars in a democracy. Most of us would have studied about the three pillars of democracy right in our school days. But many of us will have a problem exactly differentiating between the three pillars and telling what is the exact function of each pillar. If I ask you to list the executive functionaries in your district or your local area, would you be able to list all the executive functionaries? In fact, most of us have the problem. Okay, now let's take a look at the basic pillars of democracy. We will start with legislature. Legislature is nothing but the law making apparatus. The word legislation means law making. So within legislature, a group of people will sit and frame laws for the country. In India, we have a legislative body at the central level that's called Parliament. Here, the legislature consists of MPs, members of Parliament. These people will sit in the Parliament. They will frame laws for the country. At the state level, we have MLAs and MLCs, members of legislative assemblies and members of legislative council. They will sit in the respective legislative assemblies and legislative council of the respective states. So these members, the MLAs and MPs, they are none but the lawmakers of the country. Apart from lawmaking, these people are also representatives of the people living in the country. They represent the interest and the will of the people. In the legislature, which could be the parliament or the state assembly, they will raise the various issues and grievances on behalf of the people. So these people are none but the representatives of people. This is what we should understand. The second body is the executive. Executive is a body that actually runs the country. It actually implements the law in the country. It also frames the various policies and welfare schemes for the country and implements the policies and the welfare schemes in the country. The main members of executive are the ministers, the Prime Minister, Home Minister, Finance Minister, Agriculture Minister, HRD Minister. So all these people, they form the executive. Apart from the political executive, we have the permanent executive in the form of civil servants or bureaucrats. The IAS officers, the IPS officers, the various secretaries, the civil servants at the state level. These people, they also form part of the executive. This body, as I said, is the body that takes care of the overall governance of the country. This body literally runs the country. The third organ or the pillar is the judiciary. Judiciary is the network of courts that dispenses justice in the country. In India, we have Supreme Court at the top level. The second level, we have the high courts at the state level. And at the lowest level, we have the subordinate courts, which consist of the district courts and the courts below the district courts. In the judiciary, we have a network of courts in which judges will sit and they will dispense justice. This is the most important pillar in a democracy. This body actually enforces the law in the country. It ensures that the country is run as per the rule of law and as per the ideals and the principles of the constitution of that country. In most democracies, the judiciary is kept independent. The executive and the legislature, they generally won't intervene in the functioning of the judiciary. In India also, the judiciary is largely independent. The judges at the Supreme Court and at the high courts and the subordinate courts, they are given independence. So generally the judiciary is the most important organ in a democracy. Apart from dispensing justice, the judiciary also interpret the constitution of the country. It ensures that the country is run as per the ideals, principles and the values of the constitution. The Supreme Court, which sits at the topmost level of the judiciary, is the ultimate interpreter of the Indian constitution. Whenever there is a doubt regarding the constitution or regarding the values or the principles of the constitution, the Supreme Court is the ultimate interpreter which will read the constitution and will clarify the doubts. So it will give its observation and its judgment regarding the constitution also. Apart from the three pillars, we should also learn about parliamentary democracy. India is an example of parliamentary democracy. In a parliamentary democracy, generally there is fusion of powers. In a presidential form of government, generally there is no fusion of powers. The executive and the legislature, they are separate. The executive is not responsible to the legislature. But in a parliamentary form of government, there is fusion of powers between executive and the legislature. The executive is responsible to the legislature. It is answerable before the legislature. This is the most important feature of the parliamentary form of government. If you take India for example, if you take parliament, let's take Lok Sabha, the executive, we have seen the ministers, they form the executive. But here, the executive also form part of the legislature. In short, the executive itself is a subset of the overall legislature. In India, the ministers, we have seen the various ministers, the Prime Minister, Home Minister, Finance Minister and other ministers. These ministers are also MPs, which means that the executive is nothing but a subset of the legislature. If you take Lok Sabha for example, the executive is responsible to the legislature. In the Lok Sabha, we have all the MPs. The MPs belong to the ruling party as well as the various opposition parties. The executive, the Prime Minister, Home Minister and other ministers, they will have to answer before the MPs. The MPs could be a opposition party MP also. So this answerability, accountability is ensured by the parliamentary form of governance. For example, any MP from any party could question any minister. It could be the Prime Minister also. So if there is any important issue or problem in the country, any MP could raise the issue and the ministers, including the Prime Minister, will have to answer within the parliament. It could be either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. So the Prime Minister himself or herself is actually accountable to the people. If any MP is raising important issue, the Prime Minister himself will answer before the MP. So here, when the Prime Minister answers the question of the MP, it effectively means that he is answering before the people of the country. The reason is that the MP is none but a representative of the people living in the country. So this is the most important feature. So democracy, accountability, answerability is secured through the parliamentary form of governance. Generally, this accountability is not seen in presidential form of governance. America is an example of presidential form of government. Generally here there is no accountability. The president is not required to answer before the legislature. But in India, the Prime Minister, who is the equivalent of the American president, is required to answer before the people. So here the people implies the representatives who are the MPs. Thank you.